All right, now it's time to have the hard conversations here on Morning at NTV Wednesday's edition. Journey's own hashtag is Morning at NTV across our social media platforms. You can get the link to be able to stream live over Facebook as well as Twitter, which will then lead you to our YouTube channel, NTV Uganda. I am Priscilla Regina Daloga. Once again, good morning. Taking note of the will that has been in data infrastructure and how it's actually aiding transparency in Uganda. Yesterday, we did have the Africa Anti-Corruption Day being launched by the IGG's office, and of course corruption has become a bed bug everywhere you go. Maybe some of these initiatives, some of these programs, some of these things that exist can help us mitigate those issues that we are being faced with here as Uganda in terms of dispensation of public service to Ugandans. Now, the infrastructure projects were allocated a tune of 4.5 trillion Ugandan shillings, representing 13.3% of the total budget as compared to the 4.3 trillion Ugandan shillings in the previous financial year 2022-2023. Allocation for integrated transport infrastructure projects or services. But the big question is, how sustainable is data in supporting infrastructure development and transparency? This morning I'm joined by Mr. Gilbert Sendugwa, who's the Executive Director of FIC. Good morning to you, Mr. Sendugwa.
Good morning. Thank you, Priscilla, and good morning, dear viewers and listeners. And
next to him we do have Michael, who's coming in from Coast Uganda. Good morning to you, Michael.
Good morning, and thank you for hosting me.
All right, so we are looking at data infrastructure in Uganda and what role it actually plays in ensuring that there's transparency and kicking corruption out of Uganda. But one begs the question, what is data infrastructure? Let me start with Michael. What is data infrastructure?
Well, data infrastructure stems from, as you've said, over 4 trillion has been allocated to infrastructure projects, and the question is, how is this being disaggregated? How is it broken down? Who is winning which contract? So this information is out there and really is not as accessible to the ordinary citizen as we would like. So what data infrastructure is getting this information, reformatting it in a format that is accessible, machine readable, and also is accessible to the common man and easy to understand, so that there is public participation in how these infrastructure projects are actually being implemented.
Okay, Mr. Sendugwa, presently, what are the types of data infrastructure that we are accommodating?
Yeah. First of all, access to data is very, very important, because it is the beginning of being transparent and accountable. And Section 46 of the PPDA Act provides for transparency in the procurement and delivery of government contracts, including infrastructure projects. And to operationalize that, government, through the PPD, established a government procurement portal where all government agencies are required to publish contract-related data. Now, unfortunately, the levels of compliance with this requirement is low. Although what has been published there is important, it provides insights on what is taking place. These trillions, where is it going? For what purpose? What value is it bringing to government and citizens? Are there issues of concern that need attention to improve the delivery of public infrastructure? And when we talk about public infrastructure, we are looking at things like roads, railways, airports, schools, hospitals, dams. All this falls within the category of public infrastructure and very important in driving the economy. However, if there is no disclosure by government agencies, it is going to be very difficult for citizens to engage, and this creates opportunities for corruption. And when you are introducing this session, you talked about, yesterday being the African Corruption Day. And it's an important day when, reflections on strategies around the fight against corruption needs to be reviewed. And it starts with being open. It starts with government agencies being able to disclose data on the money that they have received and where it is being spent. Now, perusing through what has been taking place in the media and also following discussions in Parliament, there are significant issues of concern, where 400 million shillings is spent just to transport documents. That does not bring value to citizens. Where ministers are alleged to be asking for billions, for things that are not clear or for personal ends. So disclosing contract information then helps, for citizens to know and follow the money. This money was budgeted for X and Y. Is it where it is being spent, or it is just used to transport the documents? Those kinds of things.
Michael, talk to us about the systematic components that exist with data infrastructure.
It starts with the collection of it. How are we collecting? One of the biggest challenges we've had is when you have data, and with government mostly, in PDF documents, in scanned documents, that it becomes a nightmare to analyze and make sense of what is happening. So data infrastructure starts with agreeing on what information are we going to collect, and then creating databases or systems to collect that information. And then most importantly, actually collect that information. Now, when we collect that information, we have it, then we now agree which stakeholders are going to use what, who needs what, and how then do we direct the various stakeholders to that information. If you're a government agency, you need reports, and you create a reporting interface. If you're the public, you need to see what is happening, especially in the context of infrastructure. What's happening at planning, what's happening at preparation, what's happening at implementation, each contract. So we create for you also an interface for that. So it's a multi-stakeholder insight and identifying who needs what of the collected data and then appropriately dispersing it to them.
Okay, now that begs the question of accessibility and availability of this data in the first place, the willingness of collection, which is a two-way street. When it comes to that, Mr. Sendugwa, how easy has it been for you to actually, one, have access to this data and then be able to collect it, the availability of it to then be translated into the needs of Ugandans being addressed?
I think one of the key things that positive things that the government has done is to set up, first of all, the legal framework to require government agencies to disclose this data on contracts undertaken by government, data on budget. Number two is creating platforms where government agencies, ministries and departments can disclose this data. That is also an important step. And one of these, I think the key one that was established is the government procurement portal. Now looking at this, you find that 92% of those that are registered on this portal at least publish procurement plans. But then the problem is that as you go down the road, only 18% of these are publishing tender information, and only 13.7% of the 18% publish, award information, and then almost nothing on the execution. So that is the kind of state of disclosure. But also looking at sectors like health sector, we have analyzed in another study 20 agencies within the health sector, And we have found that for 5 years, in the last 5 years, 6 agencies have not published anything. Not procurement plans, not tender information, not award information, and no
whereas this is
execution
supposed to be
information.
mandated of them to do.
Yes, whereas this is a legal requirement that they should publish this information. And also government has put a place where they should publish it. I believe they have been trained. But then, you know, they are not doing so with impunity. Now,
when you say impunity,
the presumption...
please explain the impunity part.
Yeah, the thing is that I believe that they know the requirements to do so by law. And I also believe that they have capacity to do so. But then, they are not doing anything about it. And because nobody is questioning them about it, they are not doing it. Now, why are they not doing it? I believe that if everything was being done right, that the contracts were being advertised, the contracts were being fairly awarded, and were executed, every accounting officer would be happy, you know, to publish this information so that, you know, the world knows that they are complying with the law, they are doing the right thing, and they are bringing value to citizens and the government. So I believe that why they are not, you know, complying is they have something to hide.
Speaking of compliancy, we were talking about corruption within the systems of public service recently, and it came to light that there's so many intentional loopholes that are left there to service, you know, monies going to self-satisfaction of the office holders. They were giving us an analysis of some of these public servants. When they go to places of worship, the money they dish out, if IGG was to apply the lifestyle audit, it does not really compare in contrast to what they are actually earning at the end of the month, which then brings into perspective an analysis on perhaps the government procurement portal. Michael, this government procurement portal was established to deal away with some of these loopholes. What are those loopholes, and in its time that it has existed, has it actually addressed those loopholes? Has it closed the gaps?
Yeah, one of the ways we can really fight corruption is automation and reduce the amount of human interface. Now, prior to the government procurement portal, you know, procurement officers would board a bus, maybe monthly, travel all the way to Central here to maybe share the monthly procurement reports. Those were huge expenses if you scale them out across all government agencies in the country. So what the government procurement portal did was, one, to centralize that information and you know, reporting by procuring entities, but also bring closer to the people opportunities. For example, if you are a provider in the far west of the country, you could easily know what is happening in the far east of the country. The challenge the government procurement portal has had was that information also has its relevance, has a time aspect of it. So if you publish a tender that has expired, it may not make any meaning to a supplier. So
and yet the expired tender will be awarded.
Yes. So in that context, you find that the real-time component of the government procurement portal was lacking, and that has been exploited. Or if you publish a tender 2 days to expiry, and you know, infrastructure tenders take a while to put the documents back. And thankfully, that is what the EGP has come to, you know, correct. So we are really looking forward to all the change and the sugar that comes in.
Okay, so what are then going to be the exact components in the EGP to be able to address the loopholes in the previous one?
One, the EGP as a component of registry of all suppliers. What that means is once a tender is made available, instantly all suppliers get to know. And then the EGP is, you cannot, you know, we've had instances whereby a contract has been awarded and it's not even in the procurement plan. How does that happen? So you cannot award or even publish something that is not in the procurement plan. So the EGP is structured and forces you to follow public procurement as it should be. Also, effective submission of bids. We no longer go to the, the procurement officer and push something under the table to submit. So everything is automated, and once we reduce the human interface, I believe it will go a long way into addressing some of these things.
Mr. Seduga.
And maybe to add on that point that Michael has made, disclosure, of course, is very, very important, and an important starting point. But also critically important is the use of data. So once agencies have put information on the government procurement portal, or as will be the case under the e-government system, it is important for citizens and researchers and experts to use that information to analyze and say, what is in this data? What is it saying? Now, one of the things that we have done with this data is to actually use and analyze it on key indicators like time and cost overruns, levels of transparency, on value for money, on competition, among others. In this report, which we launched yesterday, you find, for example, that 94% of the infrastructure contracts were awarded to local firms. That's good. It means that there's some capacity that is coming up. But also, it shows that in terms of value, the 6% foreign firms have taken, a very big part, more than what the 94 have taken. Important statistic that there is need for government to intentionally provide incentives to grow capacities of local firms so that they can reduce on the value that is going outside. And
maybe that data can actually help, because government seems to provide more incentives for the foreign firms and bidders for business more than it does for the locals.
Yes. In that same report, you also see some areas of concern. For example, that the average number of bidders per tender is 1.3. That's less than 1.5 companies participate on average when a tender is advertised. The law requires at least 3. So it shows that there's lack of trust by businesses in the market. Why is there lack of trust? The level of transparencies are low. Companies don't believe that things are done over the table, but under the table. So there's need to work on this. Very important things that can help government to take corrective measures on these things. Also, another finding that a company, I think it's called Lusa, has won 52% times it has participated in contracts advertised by UNRWA. That is 38 times. So this is important. Someone would want to know.
How is that the fault of the company? Just trying to build spectrum on this. How is it the fault of the company if the company has been smart enough to position themselves well in having the actual full requirements of getting these contracts? So if they are the best in terms of what is required compared to the other competitors, why not?
Yes, it's not a fault of the company. But it raises important thoughts. For example, could it be that they have, every company is established to do business, and I believe they are competing quite aggressively. So the fact that one company wins 52% times means that raises questions as to whether it's on the basis of their strength, or the others are not doing enough, or whether they have invested in a relationship and they're harvesting benefits.
And that's why it begs.
And then also an important finding in that report, you have companies which have lost 9 times. What is it that they are not doing right? do they actually exist, or maybe some people are just bringing documents in the name of that company? So
when Michael says reducing human interface, at what point are you exactly stating that human interface ought to be reduced? Because at the end of the day, these are going to still require signatures and approvals of a certain somebody in an office, regardless of human interface reduction. There's still going to be some influence that is embedded somewhere. So what are the measures that we then need to adopt so that we don't have company X always winning the bids for whatever reasons they win it, whether they're fully qualified or in light of the fact that the others are less qualified? How do we mitigate that particular issue?
You know, the key difference here is that we now have paper trail. We can track and see. You know, procurement, you can't totally eliminate human interface. But then we now have paper trail of what has happened where. And also, most importantly, when you publish and you reveal this, one company winning 38 times and another losing 9 times, then there are questions is, those who are losing, why are they losing? Are they being informed? Or sometimes they don't even know and they keep losing over the same mistakes. So then it informs decisions on maybe interfacing with you know, suppliers and saying, this is how you organize the bid. And then those who are winning say, loser, you've done it right. Lecture us. But that comes from data being availed and exposed for all to see the way it's currently being done.
Mr. Sendugwa, perhaps it would need an arm of policy to be able to handle some of these challenges that may come forth even with the integration of you know, data in such a manner as the new government portal is doing.
Yes, of course, policies are important, and I believe that we have now sufficient policies to facilitate this. What is lacking is the implementation. And within this, one could say poor implementation is either lack of capacity or lack of will. I want to believe that at least every government agency has minimum capacity to publish this information. Because you see, if even border borders go on UNRWA portal and you know, register for driving permit and do this. So when it comes to a government agency to upload things on the government procurement portal, I don't believe that there's any government agency that should fail, either to have internet or to have the know-how on how to upload this information. So the issue of capacity maybe is discounted in that regard. Okay. The biggest challenge is lack of will. And why is there lack of will? Is because probably there are perverse interests in the way procurement is done. And that's what needs to be addressed. Okay.
So in that regard, bringing this conversation to a close, let me get your closing remarks. Michael, let me start with you. How does this data infrastructure improvement actually aid transparency and offering that willingness for other people to come in and participate actively in the processes?
One, when everybody has access to information, it levels the playing field. And also, what cost is doing with the infrastructure transparency is making the complex simple. The thing with the infrastructure is if you don't understand it, you may not know what's happening. So breaking it down so that people know what is happening. It's one thing to say a kilometer of road in Kampala cost 4 billion, while ours maybe in Lira cost 3, but there are contexts there that people need to understand. And that's what infrastructure transparency and cost is trying to bring on board. That disclose it, make it human-friendly so that everybody knows what is happening. Consequently, building trust.
All right. Mr. Sendugwa, how sustainable is data in supporting infrastructure development?
Yeah, sustainability is dependent or going to be dependent on the willingness of government agencies to disclose. What we have done at Coast is to develop, I mean, we have developed many tools, but the most recent one is this analytical dashboard, which provides real-time ability to analyze data which has been disclosed on the government procurement portal and shine light on areas that need attention. this is a very huge opportunity for all government agencies and various stakeholders to take advantage of, so that as long as data has been published on the government procurement portal, this dashboard, you just put in an indicator and then it gives you, this is red, this is green, this is orange, and then you know where to put attention and say, why is it like this? This 1.3 bidders, how can we make it at least 4 to improve trust in the market? So this is a huge opportunity that all the stakeholders need to take.
Well, thank you so much.
That on the government procurement portal.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. And this brings us to the close of this conversation. We'll be returning with our Kickstarter, where we look at the gaps in food export here in Uganda. Do stay with us.